Either do what I say or pack your bags. That's what she told me. Out loud. In front of 10 people. 2 of them were recording it. I don't remember standing up. I don't even remember pushing the chair back. But I remember the screech of it scraping the hardwood floor, sharp and violent, in the way every conversation at the dinner table just died. Like someone had pulled the plug on sound. I also remember the smile on her face. Tight. Victorious. As if I just proved her point. It was game night. That was the plan, anyway. Just a harmless night of wine and board games and fake laughter among her work friends, people who barely knew my name. Even after 4 years of marriage, I was the husband who fixed the router, showed up with groceries, and disappeared into the background when the photos were taken. I had a role, and it didn't include speaking up. Until I did. I hadn't planned to. I wasn't even angry when we arrived. But somewhere between her 3rd glass of Merlot and the 5th time she called me adorably slow, something inside me buckled. I had answered a trivia question wrong. That's it. A trivia question. She leaned across the table, looked straight at me, and said, "Sweetie, if you're not going to be useful, can you at least not embarrass me in front of my friends?" They laughed. Not all of them, but enough. And then she added, loud and cold, "I told him, in front of his friends once, to either do as I say or pack his bags." That line. That exact line. There it was again. Like a catchphrase. Like she rehearsed it. She didn't expect me to react. She never does. That's what made the silence so loud when I stood up and said, "Do you want me to leave now or wait until dessert?" No one laughed this time. Not even her. She blinked. Once. Twice. Like her brain needed to reboot. Then she said, "Oh, come on, Halden. Don't be dramatic. It's just a joke." That word. Joke. I picked up my jacket. My phone buzzed twice in my pocket. Group chat notifications. I didn't look. I walked out. I made it halfway to the elevator before I remembered my keys were in her purse. So I went back in. I shouldn't have. Because when I opened the door again, I heard Keen, her coworker, say, "Damn. He actually left. I didn't think he had it in him." And her reply? "Give him 5 minutes. He always comes crawling back." There was silence. Then another voice, Ava, maybe, or Mallory, the one who always gives me polite pity eyes, muttered, "That was kinda harsh, Serafina." I didn't wait to hear the rest. But I did get my keys. And I didn't crawl back. I drove around for 3 hours. No music. No destination. Just me and the hum of the engine and the replay of every second in my head. And when I finally parked outside our apartment and looked up at our window, her light was still on. She hadn't called. She hadn't texted. What I didn't know then was that she had sent a message. But it wasn't to me. And it would be the first domino in a collapse I never saw coming. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even pretend to try. I parked 2 blocks from our apartment, reclined the seat in my car, and just stared at the ceiling like it might have answers. I could still hear her voice echoing in my head, not the words exactly, but the tone. That mix of arrogance and dismissal, like I was a piece of old furniture she was waiting to replace but didn't want to move on her own. I thought I'd go back in the morning, maybe pack some things, maybe even talk. That was the plan. But plans don't mean much when your reality's already rotting underneath. At around 5:40 a.m., I went home. She was still asleep. Face buried in the pillow, one leg sprawled over my side of the bed like she owned it. Her makeup from the night before was smudged around her eyes, mascara stains faintly marking the pillowcase I had bought her for her birthday last year, the one with embroidered initials. HS hers and mine. Halden and Serafina. It used to mean something. I moved quietly. I didn't slam drawers, didn't mutter under my breath. I just grabbed a gym bag, stuffed it with whatever clothes I could find, and then stood in the hallway staring at the wedding photo she insisted we hang by the door. It looked like someone else's life. Before I could leave, her iPad lit up on the nightstand. I know what you're thinking, and no, I don't make a habit of snooping through her devices. But in that moment, something tugged at me. A cold curiosity. An ache for truth. So I picked it up. There was a message from someone labeled K. It read, "He's still sulking? Want me to stop by later?" There was no emoji. No flirt. Just casual familiarity, like this wasn't the first message of its kind. I tapped the thread, hands shaking. My stomach dropped as I scrolled. "K, you seriously used the pack his bags line again?" Face with tears of joy. "Serafina, it always works." He shuts down. Goes quiet. Classic Halden. "K, you're cruel. It's hot." "Serafina, You don't mind taking over a broken project, do you? "'Kay, not if I get to rebuild it my way." "Serafina, then it's yours. Sooner than you think." I don't remember putting the iPad down. I just remember the room tilting a little, like I was standing on the deck of a ship I didn't realize was sinking. All this time, I thought I was the problem, that I wasn't exciting enough, confident enough, man enough. Turns out I was just convenient. I walked out. Again. But this time I didn't go far. I parked across the street, stayed in the car, and watched our apartment window like it might give me answers. At 9:12 a.m., Keen showed up. He didn't knock. He used the keypad. She had given him the code. At 9:14, he stepped inside. At 9:15, the curtains closed. The first thought in my mind wasn't rage. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was humiliation. Sharp, stinging humiliation. Like every stupid moment I ever apologized for things I didn't do, every dinner I cooked, every message I sent saying I miss you when she was distant, had been nothing but background noise while she auditioned replacements. I didn't go back to confront her. I didn't storm in. I didn't scream. I just drove. For hours. I ended up at a rest stop 90 miles out. Sat on a concrete bench, surrounded by vending machines and strangers, trying to remember when I stopped being a person and became someone else's script to rewrite. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Serafina. "Where are you? You left the garage door open." That was it. Not "I'm sorry." Not "we need to talk." Not even "are you okay?" Just a garage door complaint. I stared at the screen and realized I was never her partner. I was a prop, an accessory in her curated life. And now that I was off script, she didn't know what to do. But I did. For the first time in years, I actually did. I didn't respond to her message. I stared at it until the screen dimmed, and even then, I kept holding the phone like it might burn through my palm. "Where are you? You left the garage door open." Not a single word acknowledging what she'd done. Nothing about Keen. Nothing about how she'd made me a punchline in her performance. Just a passive-aggressive text about the garage. Like I was still her errand boy, even after disappearing for half a day. So I turned my phone off. Not because I was trying to make a statement. I just couldn't stand the idea that she might send another message, and I'd feel obligated to read it, to analyze it, to hope for something human in her words. There wouldn't be. There hadn't been for months. Maybe longer. Instead of heading to a friend's or booking a cheap motel, I drove to a campground I used to visit with my dad when I was a kid. We'd fish there, sleep in a tent that always leaked, eat half-cooked beans over firewood that never quite lit. But it was peaceful, simple, real. I found a quiet corner under the trees, rolled down the windows, reclined my seat, and just listened to the night. Crickets. Wind. My own thoughts, finally, without interruption. That night, something in me hardened. Not in an angry, chest-thumping way, but like a quiet realization that I'd been living under someone else's gravity for too long. And I wasn't even sure if I remembered how to stand upright. By morning, I had a plan. Not revenge. Not drama. I didn't have the stomach for games. But I needed to reclaim my name. I drove home at 6:43 a.m. The sun was barely up. Birds were pecking at frost on the sidewalk. When I pulled into the driveway, I could see the upstairs blinds twitch. She was awake, watching, probably expecting me to slink back in, apologize for leaving, maybe even make coffee and pretend nothing happened. Not this time. I walked in calmly. She was in the kitchen, holding her mug like a prop in one of those perfect morning influencer posts, messy bun, robe, mismatched socks, and that smug look that said, "He came back." Of course he did. "You want to talk?" she said, already half smiling. "No," I answered flatly. She tilted her head. "Excuse me." I said no. "I'm not here to talk. I'm here to get what's mine and leave." Her smirk faltered. "You're being childish," she said, crossing her arms. "Maybe," I replied. "But I'd rather be childish than disposable." She rolled her eyes. "Halden." Nothing happened. Keen stopped by because he left his charger in my bag. I stared at her. "You give chargers code access now?" Silence. Then, "You're twisting this." I held up the iPad, already unlocked, the messages highlighted. She froze. "I read everything," I said. "You didn't make a mistake, Serafina. You made a plan, and I was never part of it. I was just the warm-up act until the headliner showed up." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For once, she had no clever retort, no dismissive jab, no guilt-tripping trick. Just silence. I walked past her, grabbed a second bag I had stashed weeks ago in the coat closet, a just-in-case bag I never thought I'd use, and headed for the door. Where are you even going? She called after me. I paused at the threshold. To wherever people don't treat me like a speed bump, I said. Then I left. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because 2 days later, I got a message from someone I never expected. Not Keen. Not Serafina. Someone who knew far more than they should and who had been watching all along. I spent the next 48 hours sleeping on a borrowed futon in the back room of an old auto shop. It belonged to Declan, a guy I used to know back in trade school. We hadn't talked in years, but when I called and said, I just need a place to be invisible, he told me to show up and not explain a thing. He gave me a key, a blanket, and a silent nod that said, "You're safe here." During those hours, I didn't check social media. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even unpack the bag I brought with me. I just sat on the dusty vinyl couch, drinking terrible gas station coffee and trying to erase the echo of Serafina's voice from my head. It didn't work. On the third morning, I finally powered my phone back on. The notifications came in a flood, 22 texts from Serafina, half of them trying to explain, the other half accusing me of overreacting, 3 missed calls from her mother, and 1 from an unknown number. That last one wasn't a call. It was a text. She did this to someone else before you. I have proof. Meet me at 4 p.m., Orchard Lot, by the burned-out diner. Alone. At first, I thought it was a prank. The timing felt too dramatic. But then I reread it, over and over, and something about the tone stuck with me. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't emotional. It was cold, calculated, like someone who had waited patiently for a moment like this to arrive. I should have ignored it, but I didn't. By 3:55 p.m., I was already sitting in my car, engine off, watching the gray sky roll in over the vacant lot. The old diner looked like it had been abandoned decades ago, its sign charred and hanging by one rusted bolt. The lot itself was cracked, littered with broken glass, overgrown grass sprouting between the pavement like nature was trying to reclaim the land. At exactly 4:01, a silver sedan pulled in. The driver stayed inside for a moment, then stepped out slowly. She was tall, around 40 maybe, wearing a green raincoat and sunglasses despite the cloudy sky. Her hair was in a tight bun, and she carried a file folder under one arm like it was some kind of classified evidence. She didn't introduce herself. "Your name's Halden, right?" she asked, walking toward me with no hesitation. I nodded. "She used to be married to my brother," she said flatly, until she drained his accounts and left him standing at a notary's office with forged divorce papers. I blinked. What? "She's done this before," the woman continued, holding the folder out to me. He didn't know until it was too late. By then, she was living in a condo someone else paid for. I opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were copies of text messages, receipts, wire transfers, all under the name Serafina Lane. And photos. Photos of her with a man who looked eerily like Keen, but older, more corporate. The timestamps dated back 5 years. Long before I ever met her. "She disappears when the mask slips," the woman said. "She manipulates, discards, reinvents. My brother lost everything. His credit was trashed. His business partner left him. He almost..." She stopped, swallowed hard. "He's in recovery now. That's why I do this. So the next guy doesn't walk into the same buzzsaw." I looked at her. "Why me? Why now?" She pulled a crumpled envelope from her coat. "Because I got this last week." She sent it to my brother's old P.O. box. Same handwriting. Same game. Thought she could taunt him. Inside was a photo of her with you. Your wedding day. With a note. Upgraded. My stomach turned. I was a trophy. A punchline. A prop in a repeat performance. And I had no idea. "I'm not here to tell you what to do," the woman said as she backed toward her car. "But you deserve to know who you're dealing with. And if she's following her pattern, you're not the last." Then she drove off. I sat in that lot for a long time, reading everything, rereading it. By the time I left, my hands were stiff from gripping the steering wheel too hard. Serafina had rewritten her history, but she wasn't counting on someone else keeping the receipts. And for the first time, I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. But that feeling didn't last. Because when I returned to the auto shop, I found my bag sitting outside the door. Unzipped. And a note, taped to it. "She's been here. Said she's your wife. Took something. Didn't want a scene." Inside, one thing was missing. My father's pocket watch. The only thing she knew I could never replace. The pocket watch wasn't just a keepsake. It wasn't some fancy heirloom tucked away in a glass case. It was my father's final gift, the one thing he left me in his will. He wore it every day for 30 years, And when cancer made his hands too weak to wind it, he handed it to me without a word. He didn't believe in long goodbyes or dramatic speeches. That watch was his way of saying, carry time the right way. Use it wisely. Serafina knew what it meant to me. She saw me clean it once a week. Saw the way I held it on hard days, like it had gravity. She knew. So when I found it missing, with a note taped to my bag saying she'd taken something, I felt like she had reached into my chest and stolen something living. She wasn't trying to take back clothes or documents or even money. She took my father. Not literally, of course, but symbolically, deliberately, like she wanted to taint anything pure I had left. I didn't call her. I didn't storm into our apartment demanding answers. I already knew how that would go. She'd twist it into a joke, turn it on me, claim it was just a sentimental thing she meant to protect. She was a master of weaponizing innocence. But I needed that watch back. So I planned carefully. Declan offered to help. He was furious when he found out what happened, not in a performative way, but with that quiet anger men like him carry deep in their bones. I got a buddy who can ping the last location if she's dumb enough to link it to a smart tag, he muttered, already pulling out his cracked laptop. I didn't even know he could do that. Turns out she was dumb enough. The watch hadn't moved in 20 hours. It was somewhere in her office. Her company owned the entire third floor of a converted warehouse downtown. It was supposed to be creative space, which meant lots of exposed brick, glass walls, and overpriced coffee. I knew the building. I'd helped her move into it. Painted the break room myself one weekend while she texted Keen in the stairwell, apparently. So I waited. Friday evening, just after 6 p.m., I walked in. The security guard was asleep at his desk. The place was mostly empty. I had kept her spare fob key on my keyring, tucked under the rubber seal. She must have forgotten I still had it, or assumed I'd be too spineless to use it. I went straight to her office. Her name was still etched in the frosted glass, Serafina Lane, creative director. It looked like a throne room. Velvet chair. Framed inspiration boards. Quotes on the wall like, own your story and design is power. It made me nauseous. The pocket watch was on her desk. Right there. Not locked in a drawer. Not hidden. Just displayed. Like a trophy. Like a warning. I stepped forward and reached for it. That's when I heard the elevator ding. Footsteps. I ducked behind the partition just before the door opened. Two voices. Her and Keen. She was laughing. Not giggling full, wild laughter. The kind I hadn't heard from her in years. Not once had she ever laughed like that at one of my jokes. Not even during our honeymoon. Did you seriously leave it right on the desk? Keen said. Of course, she replied. Let's see how long it takes him to grow a spine. You're playing with fire. Oh, please. Halden wouldn't burn a match without my permission. Keen chuckled. You're terrifying. And you're late, she said. I've got 10 minutes before the team call. But that's more than enough for you, right? Silence. Then the unmistakable sound of kissing. I closed my eyes. My fingers were gripping the edge of the desk so tight they went white. My chest burned, not from heartbreak, that was long gone, but from sheer disbelief that I had ever believed in her, that I had once written her poems, that I had named her my emergency contact. They moved toward the couch in the back corner. She giggled again. I didn't wait. I stood, walked out in full view. Calm. Measured. Serafina's mouth fell open. Keen stumbled back, trying to zip his pants like some frat boy caught in his parents' living room. I didn't say a word, just held up the watch. You don't get to keep this part of me, I said quietly. And I left. No yelling. No drama. Just a message. I see you now. All of you. And the part that scared her most? That I didn't look back. But she wasn't finished. She never is. The next morning, I woke to 30 missed calls, 7 voicemails, and 1 email. Subject line, what you took from me. But inside the message wasn't about the watch. It was something much worse. I sat in the corner of a 24-hour diner when I opened her email. It was just after 5 a.m. The kind of hour when the world feels half dead, only truckers, line cooks, and people with nowhere else to be moved through it. I hadn't slept, hadn't even touched the plate of eggs the waitress had placed in front of me. I just kept staring at my phone like it had teeth. The subject line haunted me. What you took from me. I told myself it was a trap. That it was about the watch. That she was going to frame herself as the victim now, twist things, the way she always did, into a narrative where I was the one who'd gone too far. But curiosity has a voice louder than reason when someone you once loved holds it over your head like bait. So I tapped it open. It wasn't long. Just a few cold, precise lines. You think you've won because you walked out with that antique trash? You didn't take your name off the lease. You didn't check the joint accounts. You didn't even notice what I moved yesterday. But you will. You took my time. I took your future. And if you ever make this public, I will burn what's left of your reputation until people forget you ever existed. Have a good life, Halden. S. I blinked. Reread it. Again. Then I called the bank. And that's when the floor gave out. She had emptied our savings. Every cent gone. Over $47,000, withdrawn in 2 wire transfers and 1 cashier's check, all moved within the last 36 hours. The joint account we opened 4 years ago when we said we'd build a future together? Closed. I asked the rep on the phone, how is that possible without both signatures? She replied, you gave her financial power of attorney last year. During your surgery, remember? I remembered. Of course I did. I was recovering from a hernia procedure and couldn't walk for a week. She told me not to worry, said she'd handle the bills. I trusted her. She used that moment to legally empower herself to dismantle everything I built. I hung up without thanking the rep. My mouth was too dry. I went outside and sat on the curb behind the diner, my back against a cracked vending machine, trying to steady my breath. I wasn't broke. I had my separate paycheck account, but that was barely enough for next month's rent and the insurance on my car. She knew that. She'd always called it my fun money. Now it was my only money. And then I remembered the storage unit. A few weeks ago, I'd started packing old tools, framed photos, some documents, just in case. I didn't trust her, not entirely, and I'd told myself it was a safety net. A backup plan. I hadn't told her where it was. I hadn't even written the address down. But paranoia is only useful when the enemy doesn't know you've got it. I drove straight there. My code didn't work. I tried again. Same flashing red error. I walked around to the front office and asked the clerk if there had been an issue with my unit. He pulled up the account, looked at me, then tilted his head. Sir, this unit was officially transferred to another authorized user yesterday. I felt my heartbeat in my teeth. Who? I asked. He showed me the signature. Serafina Lane. Of course. She had my power of attorney paperwork still on file. She'd used it to transfer the lease. I asked him to check if the unit had been emptied. He nodded. Cleared out by a moving company this morning. Said they were hired to relocate the contents to a long-term storage facility under her name. I didn't cry. Not there. Not then. I thanked him. Walked back to the car. But as soon as the door closed, I slammed both hands into the steering wheel and let out a sound that didn't feel human. It was the noise of something cracking too deep to fix, the scream of a man who'd finally realized that everything had been taken. Not just money. Not just trust. History. She was rewriting my life as if I never existed. I wanted to disappear. And for the next 12 hours, I did. No phone. No GPS. No social media. I parked the car behind an old mill and stared out at the water and wondered if I had ever been real to her at all. But late that night, I got one more message. From Declan. It just said, "You need to see this." Now, attached was a screenshot. A photo. From Serafina's Instagram. She was smiling on a balcony in some high-rise downtown, wearing my father's watch around her neck like jewelry. And behind her? Keen, wearing my hoodie, with the caption, "Built a life from scratch. Clean slate. No baggage." But she made one mistake. The photo was geotagged, and that one tiny oversight gave me exactly what I needed. Not to get revenge. To get my life back. The moment I saw the geotag on her photo, something inside me shifted. Not rage. Not sadness. Something colder. Focused. I zoomed in on the address, a newly developed luxury high-rise called the Harrow. I'd heard about it before in passing. The kind of place with fingerprint elevator access, doormen who probably made more than I did, and monthly fees higher than my rent. That photo wasn't just about showing off a view. It was a message. I won. That's what she wanted the world to see. Her triumph framed in sunlight and smug smiles, draped in my father's memory and wearing my hoodie like a war prize. But what she didn't realize was that she'd just told me where to find the last missing pieces of my life. Not the money. Not the watch. Me. I spent the next 12 hours preparing, not for a confrontation, but for evidence. I wanted to be smarter than her for once. So I started by visiting a lawyer I'd found online through a late-night subreddit for divorce victims. He called himself the Fire Exit because, he said, he helped people escape burning buildings. His real name was Jonathan Pell, and he worked out of a cramped office above a tattoo parlor in a strip mall that smelled like ink and regret. He listened to everything. All of it. I expected him to laugh, or raise an eyebrow, or tell me I'd been stupid. But he didn't. He just nodded as I talked, occasionally taking notes. You still have the power of attorney paperwork? He asked. I do. Good. That'll help. We'll file the void at first thing Monday. He explained that what she did, draining joint accounts, moving property, reassigning access without disclosure, could fall under a number of violations. Some civil, some criminal. It would take time. But there was a path. A narrow, rocky one, but it existed. When I stood to leave, he looked at me and said, "This is going to feel worse before it feels better." He was right. Because when I arrived outside the Harrow that evening, watching from across the street behind a coffee shop patio, I saw something I wasn't ready for. My cousin Ellie, walking into the building, with Serafina. I blinked, thought maybe I was imagining it. But no, Ellie, the same cousin who'd helped set up our wedding seating chart, who cried when I read my vows, who gave us that framed art piece I kept over my desk for years, was there. Laughing, hugging her, carrying a gift bag. I watched from a distance as they disappeared into the lobby. I felt nauseous. I waited. I couldn't stop myself. I waited 2 full hours, watching the building's side entrance. At 9:13 p.m., they came out again, joined now by Keen. All 3 of them. They didn't look like conspirators. They looked like family. Like people who shared wine and secrets and jokes about the past, my past. I left before they saw me. That night, I went through everything Ellie had sent me over the years. Birthday messages, Christmas cards, random texts. And buried in one of them from 9 months ago, I saw a photo I hadn't looked at closely before. Serafina and Ellie. At brunch. Wearing matching necklaces. Caption, my chosen sister. I was never even in the picture. It all clicked at once. The way Serafina always dodged family functions. How she rolled her eyes when my mom called. The passive digs about people who cling to small-town traditions. She'd spent years replacing my life with hers. Collecting allies. Building a new version of the story where I was the blur in the background. I wanted to scream. But instead, I made a list. Names. Documents. Conversations. Dates. Every lie I had evidence for. I wasn't going to fight fire with fire. I was going to fight it with truth. Cold, traceable truth. And then I did something I never thought I'd do. I called my mother. She hadn't heard from me in weeks. I'd pulled away because I didn't want to explain. Because I was ashamed. She didn't say, "Where have you been?" She didn't say, "I told you she wasn't right for you." She said, "Do you need a place to sleep, baby?" Just like that. The same way she did when I was 12 and came home from school with my backpack stolen and scraped knees. That night, I slept in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by shelves of comic books and the same ceiling crack that used to look like a dragon when I couldn't sleep. And in that quiet space, I found my voice again. The next morning, I scheduled an appointment with a forensic accountant. I had the folder from Serafina's ex-sister-in-law. I had power of attorney revocation forms. I had screenshots, emails, voicemails. But most of all, I had time. Something she thought she'd taken from me. But the watch still worked. And I wasn't done keeping score. 6 weeks later, I stood in the exact spot where Serafina first told me, either do what I say, or pack your bags. It was the backyard of her friend Mallory's house, during a summer party, back when I still thought those little digs were jokes, when I still believed I could win her approval with patience and compromise. Now, I looked out at the lawn from a distance, holding a manila envelope in my hand. Inside was the final piece of a story she never got to finish. The legal process had moved fast, faster than I expected. Between the revoked power of attorney, the misused accounts, and the fraudulent property transfer, her whole facade unraveled like a loose thread on designer fabric. The forensic accountant uncovered transactions she never expected anyone to find: shell companies, private transfers, consulting fees paid to Keen from businesses she hadn't disclosed. Jonathan Pell, my fire exit lawyer, had smiled when he slid the finalized documents across his desk. "You're free," he said. "And not just divorced. Cleared." The court ruled that all funds taken from the joint account after my surgery were to be returned, plus penalties. Her assets were frozen. She was required to return all property in her possession that predated the marriage. That included my tools, my documents, my furniture, and my father's watch. I held it now. The ticking was faint, but steady, just like me. I didn't press charges for the criminal side, though I could have. I didn't smear her name online. I didn't even show up to the final hearing. I didn't need to. Truth had already stripped her down further than revenge ever could. But I did write her a letter. It was short. 3 sentences. I hope the silence teaches you what your noise never could. I hope one day you understand that control is not love. And I hope, sincerely, that you never find another version of me to break. I never mailed it. I didn't have to. Because I mailed something else instead, anonymously, in a plain white envelope addressed to the Harrow's leasing office, a copy of the forged financial transfer papers, with an anonymous tip line circled in red. They evicted her 2 days later. Declan and I celebrated with greasy burgers and a 6-pack in the back of his garage. He toasted to small men with big backbones. I toasted to quiet exits and loud comebacks. And life moved on. I got a job offer from a climate control firm out west. Better pay, better benefits, and best of all, no shared bank accounts or designer drama. I took it. Sold my old car. Packed up the last of my things. Said goodbye to the ghost of who I used to be. And before I left, I stopped by my mother's house one last time. She met me on the porch, holding a gift. It was a new leather case for the watch. You don't let it define you, she said. But you protect what matters. I keep it on my desk now, in my new apartment, in a city where no one knows my name yet. And that's exactly how I like it. Sometimes, at night, I imagine her still scrolling through photos, still trying to curate a story for people who never knew the truth. But I don't hate her anymore. She can have the likes. I have peace. And in the end, that's all I ever wanted.